The knife pressed against her throat, and Mara felt nothing but the strange, quiet certainty that she had always known this moment would come. Queen Isolde's guards had surrounded them in the great hall of Thornwood Castle, their steel gleaming in the torchlight, their faces masks of cold duty. But it was not the Queen's soldiers who held the blade to Mara's skin. It was her husband, the Duke of Ashworth, the man who had chosen her from a village crowd, who had promised to protect her, who had made her believe, against all reason, that she might finally belong somewhere. His hand trembled against her shoulder, his breath came in ragged gasps against her ear, and yet his voice, when it came, was steady as stone. "You will not touch her," Adrian Vale said to the Queen of England. "You will not come one step closer. I swear by God and by every drop of blood in my body, if you harm her, I will burn this kingdom to the ground before I let you take her." Mara could feel the warmth of his chest against her back, could feel the desperate grip of his fingers on her arm, could feel the way his heart pounded against her spine like a trapped bird trying to escape its cage. And in that moment, surrounded by armed guards, facing the most powerful woman in the realm, she understood something that surprised her more than the blade at her throat. She loved him. She loved the man who had married her as an act of revenge, who had brought her to his castle to humiliate his aunt, who had never once asked her if she wanted to be part of his schemes. She loved the man who had spent months pushing her away, mocking her strange habits, demanding she conform to the expectations of his world. She loved the man who had finally, too late, realized that she was worth more than any title, any fortune, any scheme. "I will not let you destroy her," Adrian continued, his voice rising above the whispers of the assembled court. "I will not let you take her from me, not because of some title, not because of some throne, because she is everything. She is my everything, and if you have to kill me to reach her, then so be it. But I swear to you, Your Majesty, I will not go quietly." The Queen's face was pale beneath her heavy crown, her fingers white-knuckled against the arms of her throne. Around her, the nobles of England watched in breathless silence, their eyes darting between the Duke, his village-born Duchess, and their monarch. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe. Mara closed her eyes and remembered the first time she had seen Adrian Vale. The morning had begun like any other in the village of Thornwood. The sun had risen over the thatched roofs, mist clinging to the low fields like a ghost unwilling to leave. Mara had been awake since before dawn, as she always was, tending to the herbs in the small garden behind the cottage she shared with the old healer who had raised her. Her fingers were stained green from crushing comfrey leaves, and her hair, a wild tangle of chestnut curls, had escaped its simple braid hours ago. She had been preparing remedies for the village children, who always seemed to fall ill at the change of seasons. Little Thomas had a fever that would not break. Mary's youngest had been coughing for 3 days, and old Martha, the baker's mother, had complained of aching joints that made it impossible to sleep. Mara did not mind the work. She had been doing it for as long as she could remember, ever since the healer had taken her in as an infant, a foundling left on the cottage doorstep, with nothing but a scrap of cloth and a strange birthmark on her shoulder. She remembered the day she had first noticed the birthmark. She had been 7 years old, washing herself in the stream behind the cottage, when she caught her reflection in the still water. There, just below her left shoulder, was a mark that looked like a crescent moon surrounded by tiny dots, like stars gathered around a sliver of night. She had asked the healer about it, but the woman had only grown quiet, and said, "Some marks are meant to be hidden, child. Some stories are meant to wait." Mara had not understood then. She had not understood many things. She had not understood why the village children mocked her, why the adults whispered behind their hands when she walked past, why the local priest had once told her that she was touched by something strange. She was simply Mara. She helped the sick. She tended the old. She spoke to the animals in the fields, and knew which mushrooms would heal, and which would kill. She did not think this made her strange. She thought this made her useful. But the villagers did not see usefulness. They saw a girl who lived with a healer, known for her unusual knowledge of herbs and old customs. They saw a girl who rarely spoke in company, who seemed to know things she should not know, who had appeared in the village as an infant with no explanation and no family. They called her the village misfit. They crossed themselves when she walked past. And when the Duke of Ashworth arrived with his grand carriage, and his fine clothes and his cold, beautiful face, they had pointed her out to him as a warning. She had been in the village square when the announcement came. The Duke had declared that if the Queen insisted on controlling his marriage, he would choose his own bride. He would choose a woman from the village, a woman of humble birth, a woman who would make the Queen furious. The crowd had gathered around him in the square, the villagers pressing close to catch a glimpse of the nobleman who had come to their remote corner of England. Mara had been at the back of the crowd, trying to slip away unnoticed. She had been on her way to see Thomas's mother, who had sent word that the fever was worsening, but the press of bodies had been too thick, and before she could escape, the Duke's voice had cut through the noise. "I have made my decision," he had said, his voice carrying across the square like a blade slicing through silk. "I have found my bride." The crowd had gone silent. The baker's daughter had smoothed her skirts and smiled. The merchant's niece had adjusted her bonnet and blushed. All of them had expected to be chosen. All of them had prepared for this moment. Then Adrian Vale had raised his arm and pointed directly at Mara. Her. The crowd had erupted into laughter. They had laughed, loud and cruel, because surely the Duke was joking. Surely he was mocking them, mocking the strange girl with the wild hair and the dirt-stained hands and the birthmark that everyone had heard about, but no one had ever seen. Surely he would not choose the village misfit to be his duchess. But Adrian had not laughed. He had walked through the crowd, his boots splashing through the mud, his coat brushing against the dirty clothes of the peasants, and he had stopped in front of Mara. He had looked down at her with eyes the color of a winter sea, cold and grey and full of something that might have been anger or might have been pain. "What is your name?" he had asked. "Mara," she had whispered. "Just Mara." "Well, just Mara," he had said, and there had been the faintest edge of bitterness in his voice. "You have just become the Duchess of Ashworth. I suggest you prepare yourself. We leave for the castle at dawn." She had stared at him, unable to speak. She had thought he was playing a cruel joke, that he would laugh and walk away, that she would return to her cottage and continue her work, and never think of this moment again. But his eyes had been serious, cold and serious, and full of a determination that frightened her more than the laughter of the crowd. "Why?" she had asked. "Why would you choose me?" He had smiled then, but there had been no warmth in it. "Because," he had said, "sometimes the best way to wound an enemy is to choose something they would never understand." The carriage ride to Ashworth Castle had been unbearable. Mara had sat across from Adrian, in the velvet-lined interior, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. She had never been in a carriage before. She had never been more than 5 miles from Thornwood. She had never worn anything finer than the simple wool dress she had borrowed from the healer, a dress that felt absurdly rough against the fine upholstery of the carriage. Adrian had barely looked at her. He had stared out the window, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against his knee. He had not spoken to her beyond the brief exchange in the village square. He had not explained why he had chosen her. He had not told her what he expected of her. He had simply taken her, like a possession, and now she was his. "I have conditions," she had finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. He had turned to look at her, and there had been surprise in his eyes. He had not expected her to speak. He had not expected her to demand anything. "What conditions?" he had asked. She had taken a breath, steadying herself. "I will marry you," she had said, "but only if you agree to 3 things. You will never publicly humiliate me. You will never treat me as property. And you will never ask me to pretend I am someone I am not." Adrian had stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he had laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was a laugh of disbelief, of derision, of mockery. "Those are strange conditions for a village girl," he had said. "What makes you think you have any power to negotiate?" "I have nothing," she had said, and her voice had been steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "I have no family, no fortune, no connections, but I do have my dignity, and if you do not agree to my conditions, I will walk out of this carriage and back to my village, and you will have to find another bride." He had watched her for a long moment, and something in his expression had shifted. He had seen, perhaps for the first time, that she was not as weak as she appeared, that she was not simply a pawn to be moved across his chessboard, that she had a will of her own. "I agree," he had finally said. "You will have your conditions, but you will also have your duties. You will serve as my duchess. You will attend the functions I require, and you will never, under any circumstances, reveal that this marriage is anything other than a love match. Do you understand?" "I understand," she had said. And she had understood, perhaps more than he did, that this marriage was a cage disguised as a crown. But she had agreed anyway, because what else was she supposed to do? She had no home to return to. The healer who had raised her had died 3 months ago, and the cottage would soon be claimed by the landlord. She had no family to protect her, no friends to shelter her. She had nothing but her dignity and her strange, inconvenient pride. And so she had become the Duchess of Ashworth. The castle had been overwhelming. It had risen from the mist like a grey giant, its towers reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping at clouds. The stone walls had been cold and damp, the corridors endless and winding, the servants silent and watchful. Mara had felt like a mouse in a maze, scurrying through passages she did not understand, trying to find her place in a world that did not want her. The nobles at court had been worse. They had stared at her with open contempt, their eyes raking over her simple dress, her untamed hair, her unmanicured hands. They had whispered behind their fans, their words just loud enough to carry. "They say he chose her to spite the queen. She looks like she just crawled out of a ditch. Can you imagine having to sit beside her at dinner?" Mara had pretended she did not hear. She had smiled, nodded, made the correct curtsies. She had done everything she was supposed to do. But inside, she had felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, until she was nothing but a shadow in the corner of her own life. Adrian had not helped. He had been cold and distant, performing his duties as a husband during public events, but ignoring her when they were alone. He had given her a suite of rooms in the West Wing, far from his own chambers. He had provided her with servants, clothing, and an allowance. But he had not given her kindness. He had not given her warmth. He had not given her anything except the cold, hard reality that she was a pawn in a game she did not understand. "Your Grace," a servant had said one evening, stepping into her chambers with a silver tray. "The Duke requests your presence in the great hall. There is a gathering tonight." Mara had been reading, curled up in a chair by the fire with an old book of herbal remedies that she had found in the castle library. She had looked up, surprised, and set the book aside. "What kind of gathering?" she had asked. "The local gentry," the servant had said. "They wish to meet the new Duchess." Mara had felt her stomach drop. She had known this moment would come. She had known she would have to face the nobility eventually, but she had not been prepared. She had not been prepared for the cruel whispers, the judgmental stares, the unspoken questions that filled every silence. "I will be there shortly," she had said. The servant had bowed and left, and Mara had stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had looked like a stranger. Her hair had been tamed into an elaborate arrangement of curls. Her dress had been a deep green silk that the maids had pressed on her, insisting it was fashionable. Her cheeks had been pinched with a faint hint of rouge. She had looked like a duchess. But she had not felt like one. She had still felt like Mara, the village misfit, the strange girl with the birthmark, the woman who had been chosen as a weapon in a war she did not understand. The great hall had been full of people. They had been clustered in groups, laughing and chatting, their faces animated and bright. They had been beautiful, all of them, with their fine clothes and their perfect posture, and their carefully cultivated smiles, and Mara had felt like a weed in a garden of roses. Adrian had been standing by the hearth, surrounded by a group of nobles. He had been laughing at something, his head tipped back, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Mara had never seen him laugh like that, at least, never when she was in the room. She had crossed the floor, her heart pounding, and had curtsied to the assembled guests. "Your Grace," someone had said, "we were just discussing the recent developments in London. The Queen has been quite vocal about her displeasure regarding your marriage. She says it is an insult to the crown." Adrian's smile had faded. He had turned to look at Mara, his eyes flat and cold. "The Queen is entitled to her opinion," he had said. "But I am entitled to my choices, and I have chosen my bride. If the Queen does not approve, that is her concern, not mine." Mara had felt a strange thrill at his words, even though she knew they were not spoken out of affection. He had defended her, in his way. He had made it clear that she was his choice, even if the choice was made for all the wrong reasons. But the defense had been hollow. Because even as he had spoken, his eyes had not met hers. He had looked past her, through her, as if she was barely there. And in that moment, Mara had understood that she was not a person to him. She was a symbol, a tool, a weapon pointed at his enemies. She had excused herself early that evening, pleading a headache. She had returned to her chambers, dismissed her maids, and sat in the dark, staring out the window at the moon. She had felt so alone, so utterly and completely alone. And then she had done something she had not done since the healer died. She had cried. Not for herself, not for her situation, but for the strange, lonely man who had married her. Because beneath all his coldness, beneath all his cruelty, she had glimpsed something else. Something broken, something sad, something that made her want to reach out and hold him, even though she knew he would never let her. The weeks had passed slowly. Mara had thrown herself into her duties, determined to prove that she was more than a village misfit. She had learned the names of every servant in the castle, from the youngest scullery maid to the oldest butler. She had visited the kitchens, the stables, the gardens, learning how the household was run, how the vast web of the estate functioned. She had treated everyone with the same kindness, the same gentleness, the same respect. And slowly, something had changed. The servants had stopped whispering behind her back. The guards had started nodding to her in the corridors. The nobles, while still distant, had become less hostile. They had begun to see that she was not just a weapon, she was a person who was trying her best to do the right thing. But it had been the incident with the stolen silver that had truly changed everything. Mara had been walking through the west corridor when she had heard the commotion. A maid, a young girl named Eliza, was being dragged toward the entrance by two guards. She was weeping, her face streaked with tears, her hands bound in front of her. "Please," the girl had sobbed. "I did not steal the silver, I swear it. I would never steal anything. Please, you have to believe me." One of the guards had laughed. "That's what they all say. The Duke doesn't tolerate thieves. You'll be lucky if you only lose a hand." Mara had stepped forward, her heart racing. What is happening here? The guards had stopped and looked at her, their expressions shifting from contempt to uncertainty. "Your Grace," one of them had said, "we found this girl with the silver in her possession. She must have stolen it from the dining hall." Mara had looked at Eliza, at the fear in her eyes, and she had known the girl was telling the truth. She had seen that kind of fear before, in the animals that wandered into her garden. She had seen it in the eyes of the sick and the dying. It was the fear of the innocent, the helpless, the condemned. "Where did you find the silver?" Mara had asked. "In her quarters," the guard had said. "Under her mattress." "Show me." The guards had hesitated, but they had complied. They had led Mara to the servants' quarters, a cramped room at the far end of the castle. They had opened the trunk at the foot of Eliza's bed, and pulled out a small collection of silver spoons, all bearing the Ashworth crest. Mara had examined the spoons carefully. She had turned them over in her hands, feeling the weight, the texture, the age, and then she had looked more closely at the crest. There was something wrong with it. The engraving was slightly different from the crest on the spoons in the dining hall. The lion's mane was too short. The crown was too large. These were not Ashworth silver. These were imitations, cleverly made but not quite perfect. "Tell me," Mara had said, turning to Eliza, "where did you get these?" The girl had wept harder. "I found them," she had said. "I found them in the garden, buried near the old fountain. I thought they were worthless. I thought someone had thrown them away. I was going to sell them to buy medicine for my mother. Please, Your Grace, I swear I did not steal them." Mara had believed her. She had believed her because she had seen the same desperation in the eyes of the villagers, the same fear, the same hope. She had turned to the guards and said, "This girl is innocent. She did not steal these spoons. The guards had looked at her with disbelief. But your grace, the evidence is false, Mara had said. These spoons are not Ashworth silver. They are imitations. Someone planted them here to frame her, and I intend to find out who. The investigation had taken her 3 days. Mara had spoken to every servant in the castle, questioned every guard, searched every corner of the estate. She had discovered that the old fountain in the garden had been recently disturbed, that the soil was fresh, that the spoons had been planted deliberately. She had also discovered that one of the senior servants, a man named Hastings, had been dismissed from his previous position for theft. He had been hired by Adrian's steward, who had not checked his references. Mara had presented her findings to Adrian in his study. He had listened without comment, his face unreadable. Hastings planted the spoons, she had said. He was planning to use the theft as a distraction, while he stole more valuable items from the castle. He also intended to frame Eliza, so that he would not be suspected. I suggest you have him arrested. Adrian had looked at her for a long moment. How did you figure this out? He had asked. Mara had shrugged. I listened. I asked questions. I noticed things that did not make sense. The spoons were too clean to have been buried for long. The dirt was fresh. The crest was wrong. And Hastings had a motive. It was not complicated. Adrian had smiled then, a genuine smile that Mara had never seen before. Not complicated, he had repeated. You are something else, Mara. You are something else entirely. The incident had changed something between them. Adrian had begun to see her differently, to treat her with a grudging respect. He had started inviting her to his study, discussing household matters with her, asking for her opinions. He had not yet opened his heart to her, but he had opened his mind, and Mara had taken that as a victory. But the greatest change had come when she had discovered the horse. She had been walking in the stables, checking on the animals, when she had noticed something strange about one of the horses. A beautiful grey mare, the favorite of one of Adrian's hunting friends, had been standing in its stall, listless and trembling. Its eyes were glassy, its coat was dull. It was clearly sick, and Mara had known at once that it was not a natural illness. She had examined the horse carefully, feeling its flanks, checking its gums, smelling its breath, and then she had found it. A small wound on its neck, barely visible, where something had been injected into its bloodstream. The mare had been poisoned. Mara had acted quickly. She had gathered herbs from the garden, mixed them into a poultice, administered it to the wound. She had sat with the horse through the night, speaking to it softly, stroking its mane, willing it to live. And by morning, the mare had begun to recover. When Adrian had heard what she had done, he had come to find her. His eyes had been full of an emotion she could not name, something between anger and wonder. Everyone thought the horse was dying, he had said. The veterinarian said there was nothing to be done. But you saved it. How? I knew what was wrong, Mara had said. I knew what to do. It was not magic. It was simply knowledge. Adrian had shaken his head. You are not what I expected, he had said. You are not what anyone expected. Mara had met his eyes. I know, she had said. I have never been what anyone expected. I learned a long time ago that expecting anything from me was a mistake. I am just Mara. I am just me. Adrian had looked at her for a long moment, and something had shifted in his gaze, something that looked almost like affection. But he had said nothing. He had simply nodded and walked away. The Queen's arrival had been announced by a flurry of messengers, the castle thrown into chaos, the servants running in every direction. Mara had felt a chill when she heard the news. She had never met the Queen. She had never wanted to meet the Queen, but she knew, deep in her bones, that this meeting would change everything. Adrian had been tense in the days leading up to the Queen's arrival. He had snapped at the servants, spent long hours in his study, refused to speak to anyone. Mara had tried to approach him, to offer comfort, but he had pushed her away. This is not your concern, he had said, his voice clipped. This is between the Queen and me. It is my concern, Mara had insisted. I am your wife. Whatever happens between you and the Queen affects me as well. You cannot shut me out of this. Adrian had turned to look at her, his eyes blazing with anger. Do you think this is a game? He had demanded. Do you think this is a simple disagreement that can be resolved with your kindness, and your herbs, and your quiet words? The Queen is a ruthless woman. She does not care about you or your feelings. She cares about power, and I have taken something from her. Something she wanted, something she believes is rightfully hers. You mean me? Mara had said quietly. Adrian had not denied it. Yes, he had said. She sees you as a threat. She sees you as an insult. She will do everything in her power to destroy you. Do you understand that? Do you understand what you have walked into? Mara had nodded. I understand, she had said, but I do not fear her. Why? Adrian had asked, his voice cracking. Why do you not fear her? She has the power to destroy you. She has the power to destroy everything you have. Do you not understand that? Mara had stepped closer to him, close enough to touch. I understand, she had said. But I also understand that fear is a choice. I refuse to be afraid of a woman I have never met. I refuse to give her that power over me. I will meet her as I am, and if she does not like it, then she will have to answer to me. Adrian had stared at her, his eyes searching her face. And then he had laughed. It had been a ragged laugh, a broken laugh, a laugh that was half sob. You are extraordinary, he had said. You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, and I am sorry. I am so sorry. For what? Mara had asked. Adrian had shaken his head. For everything, he had said. For the way I treated you, for the way I used you, for the way I made you a pawn in my war against the Queen. You deserved better. You deserved so much better. Mara had reached out and taken his hand. I am not sorry, she had said. I am not sorry I married you. I am not sorry I came here. I am not sorry for any of it. Why? Adrian had asked. Mara had smiled. Because, she had said, sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we never expected. The Queen's arrival had been a spectacle. The procession had stretched for miles, banners flying, trumpets sounding, crowds lining the roads to catch a glimpse of the monarch. The Queen herself had travelled in a gilded carriage, surrounded by her personal guard, resplendent in velvet and jewels. She was a small woman, but there was nothing small about her presence. She commanded attention. She commanded fear. She commanded the room. And Mara had stood in the great hall, her hands folded in front of her, her chin held high, and she had watched the Queen walk toward her. So, the Queen had said, stopping in front of Mara, you are the woman my nephew chose. You are the woman who has caused so much scandal. You are the woman everyone is talking about. Mara had curtsied. Your Majesty, she had said, I am honored to meet you. The Queen had laughed. It had been a sharp, cruel laugh that made Mara's skin prickle. Honored, she had repeated. I doubt that. I doubt you are honored at all. I doubt you even understand what you have done. I understand that I have married the Duke of Ashworth, Mara had said. I understand that I am his wife. I understand that I owe you my respect, as I owe respect to any woman of your station. But I also understand that I owe you nothing else. I have done nothing wrong. I have not stolen anything. I have not lied about anything. I have simply married a man who asked me to marry him. The Queen's eyes had widened. She had not expected Mara to speak so boldly. She had not expected Mara to challenge her. You have a sharp tongue, the Queen had said. That will not serve you well in this court. It has served me well enough so far, Mara had said. I have made my way through life with nothing but my tongue and my hands and my heart. I have not needed anything else. I have not wanted anything else. The Queen had stared at her for a long moment, and then something had changed in her expression, something that had made Mara's blood run cold. The Queen had been looking at her face, studying her features, searching for something that Mara did not understand. Where did you come from? The Queen had asked. Where were you born? Mara had been surprised by the question. I do not know, she had said. I was found as an infant. I was raised by a healer in Thornwood. I have no parents, no family, no connections. The Queen had gone pale. Her hands had trembled. What is your birthmark? She had asked. What does it look like? Mara had felt a chill. She had never told anyone about her birthmark. It was a secret she had kept, a mark she had hidden. But somehow, The queen had known. What birthmark? Mara had asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The queen had stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Do not lie to me, she had hissed. I know you have a birthmark. I know it is on your left shoulder, beneath the collarbone. I know it looks like a crescent moon surrounded by stars. I need to see it. Show it to me, now. Mara had taken a step back. I do not understand, she had said. Why does this matter? Why does my birthmark matter to you? The queen had laughed again, but this time the laugh had been brittle, desperate, almost hysterical. Because, she had said, I have been looking for you for 20 years. You are not a village foundling. You are a princess of the blood. You are the daughter of my sister, the late Queen Matilda, and you are the rightful heir to the throne of England. The words had hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mara had felt the world tilt beneath her feet, the ground shifting, the sky darkening. She had tried to speak, but no words had come. She had tried to breathe, but her lungs had refused to work. I do not understand, she had finally whispered. I am a village girl. I am nobody. I am nothing. You are everything, the queen had said, her voice flat and cold. You are the daughter of Queen Matilda, who was betrayed and killed during the rebellion. You were smuggled out of the palace as an infant, by a loyal servant. You were hidden in a village, raised by a healer, who knew the truth. And I have been searching for you ever since. Why? Mara had asked, her voice breaking. Why did you search for me? To protect me? To help me? The queen had laughed. It had been a hollow, bitter laugh that chilled Mara to the bone. To destroy you, she had said. Your mother's blood is a threat to my throne. Your claim is stronger than mine. The nobles would rally to you. The people would follow you. You are a danger to everything I have built, and I cannot allow you to exist. The queen had gestured to her guards, and Mara had felt strong hands grip her arms. She had been dragged toward the door, struggling, fighting, screaming. But no one had come to help her. No one had come to save her. And then Adrian had appeared. He had been standing in the doorway, his face white, his eyes blazing. Let her go, he had said, his voice low and dangerous. Let her go now. The queen had smiled. Ah, my dear nephew, she had said. I was wondering when you would arrive. Did you know? Did you know what your village bride really was? Adrian had shaken his head. I did not know, he had said. But it does not matter. She is my wife. She is under my protection, and I will not let you harm her. You have no choice, the queen had said. This is not a game, Adrian. This is a matter of state. This is a matter of the crown. Your loyalty should be to me, not to some village girl who happens to have royal blood. My loyalty, Adrian had said, is to my wife. And I will not let you take her from me. The queen had laughed. You are a fool, she had said. A pathetic, lovesick fool. But very well. If you want to protect her, then you will have to do so with your life. The queen's guards had drawn their swords. Adrian had stepped in front of Mara, shielding her with his body. He had pulled a knife from his belt, holding it in front of him, his eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers. Stay back, he had said. I warn you, stay back. The guards had hesitated. They had seen the look in Adrian's eyes, and they had known he was not bluffing. He would die for Mara. He would die to protect her. And that was when Mara had felt the blade at her throat. I will not let you destroy her, Adrian was saying, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. I will not let you take her from me, not because of some title, not because of some throne, because she is everything, she is my everything, and if you have to kill me to reach her, then so be it. But I swear to you, your majesty, I will not go quietly. The queen had stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Adrian, she had said, do not do this. Do not make me your enemy. I have always loved you. I have always protected you. Do not throw away everything we have built for a woman you barely know. I know her better than I know myself, Adrian had said. I know her heart. I know her soul. I know that she is kinder, braver, and more honorable than anyone in this room, and I will not let you harm her. The queen had looked at him for a long moment, and then, to Mara's surprise, she had begun to weep. She had covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. You love her, the queen had said. You truly love her. Yes, Adrian had said. I love her. I love her more than I ever thought I could love anyone. And if loving her makes me a fool, then I am a fool. But at least I am a fool who is true to himself. The tension in the room had broken. The Queen's guards had lowered their swords. The nobles had begun to murmur among themselves. And Mara had felt the knife at her throat disappear. She had turned to look at Adrian, and there had been tears in his eyes. Tears that he had not let fall. Tears that he had hidden behind a wall of anger and pride for so long. I am sorry, he had said, his voice barely a whisper. I am sorry for everything. I am sorry for using you. I am sorry for hurting you. I am sorry for not telling you that I loved you sooner. I have been such a fool. Such a blind, stupid fool. Mara had reached up and touched his face. You are not a fool, she had said. You are just a man who was too afraid to admit what he felt. And that is something I understand. Because I was afraid too. I was afraid to hope. I was afraid to believe. But I am not afraid anymore. She had kissed him. She had kissed him in front of the Queen, in front of the nobles, in front of everyone. She had kissed him because she loved him, and because she did not care who knew it. The days that followed had been strange. The Queen had withdrawn to her chambers, refusing to see anyone. Adrian had spent hours in his study, talking to his advisors, trying to figure out what to do next. And Mara had walked through the castle, feeling like a ghost in her own life. She was a princess. She was the daughter of a queen. She was the rightful heir to the throne, but she did not feel like a princess. She did not feel like a queen. She felt like Mara, the village misfit, the strange girl with the birthmark, the woman who had married a duke for all the wrong reasons, and had fallen in love with him anyway. I do not want the throne, she had told Adrian one evening. They had been standing in the garden, looking out at the fields. I do not want to be queen. I do not want any of it. Adrian had turned to look at her. You do not have to be queen, he had said. You do not have to do anything you do not want to do. We can leave. We can go somewhere far away. We can disappear. Mara had shaken her head. I cannot run, she had said. I have spent my whole life running. Running from the truth. Running from myself. Running from the fear that I would never belong anywhere. I am done running. I am going to face this. I am going to face the Queen, and I am going to find a way to make things right. Adrian had reached out and taken her hand. Then I will face it with you, he had said. I will stand beside you. I will support you. I will do whatever it takes to help you. Mara had smiled. I know, she had said. I have always known. The confrontation with the Queen had been inevitable. Mara had requested a private audience, and the Queen had agreed. They had met in the Queen's chambers, alone, without guards, without witnesses. I am not here to fight you, Mara had said. I am not here to challenge you. I am not here to take your throne. The Queen had looked at her with suspicion. Then why are you here? She had asked. Mara had taken a breath. I am here to offer you a choice, she had said. You can continue to fight me. You can continue to try to destroy me. You can continue to live in fear of losing everything you have built. Or you can step down. You can admit the truth. And you can spend the rest of your life rebuilding what you have broken. The Queen had laughed. You think I will simply step down? She had demanded. You think I will hand over my crown to a village girl who knows nothing about ruling? I know nothing about ruling, Mara had agreed. But I know something about healing. I know something about kindness. I know something about listening. And I think that is exactly what this kingdom needs. The Queen had stared at her for a long moment. And then, to Mara's surprise, the Queen had begun to cry. I was so afraid, the Queen had said. I was so afraid of losing everything. I had sacrificed so much to become queen. My family, my friends, my sanity. I could not let it all go. I could not let everything I had done be for nothing. Mara had stepped closer. I understand, she had said. I understand what it is like to be afraid. I understand what it is like to feel like you have nothing. But fear does not have to control you. You can let it go. You can start again. You can heal. The Queen had looked at her, her eyes wet with tears. You are so like her, she had said. So like my sister. She was kind too. She was generous. She was everything I was not. Then honor her memory, Mara had said. Honor her by becoming the woman she believed you could be. The Queen had stepped down. She had made a public announcement, confessing everything. She had admitted that she had lied about Mara's mother, that she had manipulated the succession, that she had ruled through fear and control, and she had asked for forgiveness. The kingdom had been shocked. The nobles had been divided. The people had been confused. But slowly, gradually, a new order had begun to emerge. Mara had not become queen. She had refused the crown, insisting that the kingdom needed a new kind of leadership, a leadership that did not depend on bloodlines and titles. Instead, she had proposed a council of nobles, merchants, villagers, and ordinary citizens, a council that would govern alongside a ceremonial monarch. It had been a radical idea, but it had worked. The years had passed. Mara had grown older, wiser, more comfortable in her own skin. She had not become a perfect princess. She had remained the same woman who walked barefoot through the village, who listened to servants, who helped heal sick children, who remembered the names of ordinary people. She had remained Mara, the village misfit, the strange girl with the birthmark, the woman who had married a duke for all the wrong reasons, and had fallen in love with him anyway. And Adrian? Adrian had become the man she had always known he could be. He had softened, opened, learned to love without needing to win. He had become her partner, her confidant, her friend. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian had asked her one evening. They had been sitting in the garden, watching the sunset, their hands intertwined. "Regret what?" Mara had asked. "Marrying me," Adrian had said. "I was so cruel to you. I used you. I treated you like a weapon. You deserved so much better." Mara had smiled. "I do not regret anything," she had said. "If I had not married you, I would never have discovered who I truly am. I would never have discovered that I am stronger, braver, and more capable than I ever imagined. I would never have discovered that I could love someone as much as I love you." Adrian had kissed her hand. "I love you," he had said. "I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. And I am sorry I did not tell you sooner. I am sorry I wasted so much time being angry and afraid." Mara had leaned her head against his shoulder. "You did not waste time," she had said. "You needed time. You needed to heal, and I was patient. I waited, because I knew that you were worth waiting for." They had sat in silence for a long moment, watching the stars emerge one by one, and Mara had felt a deep, peaceful contentment settle over her. She had found her place, she had found her people, she had found her purpose, and she had found her love. It had not been easy. It had not been simple. It had been messy and painful and full of doubt, but it had been worth it, every moment of it. The village that had once called her the Misfit had become something else entirely. It had become known as the village that raised the kingdom's beloved queen. Pilgrims had traveled from far and wide to see the cottage where she had grown up, the garden where she had learned to heal, the well she had asked Adrian to repair. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the most ordinary people could become extraordinary. And Mara had visited often. She had walked through the streets, remembering her childhood, remembering the healer who had raised her, remembering the strange, lonely girl she had once been. "You were right," she had whispered to the healer's memory. "You were right about everything. Some marks are meant to be hidden, some stories are meant to wait, and some people are meant to become something more than they ever imagined." She had touched her shoulder, feeling the crescent moon birthmark beneath her fingers. It was still there, unchanged, a reminder of who she was and where she had come from. She was Mara, the village misfit, the strange girl with the birthmark, the duchess, the princess, the woman who had found her place in the world. And she was finally, truly, completely at peace. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected love and royal secrets, I have countless more stories waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every week we travel back in time to a world of dukes, duchesses, and forbidden romance. The next story might just be your new favorite. I'll see you there.